Hello and welcome to the Premier Pundits. We got a bit of role reversal here because we have a bit of a change in setup. There was some tech gremlins. So today I am the host and in control. But of course, it's the usual team, the dream team, I would say, especially around this dreamy period, this festive period around December. We're getting close to Christmas, and this is going to be our last show before that all-important Boxing Day filled time. And we've got a lot to get through in this very short period of time. So, Ben, I've got to throw it over to you. How are you doing today? And what can you bring us in today's show?
Look, we're in the middle, like you say, very, very busy period. It's still early in terms of a general game week. So there are a lot of undecided, unknown factors, which can which will be ironed out really until maybe a day or two before the actual game. So I will be monitoring, I will be tracking, and hopefully we can get those updates provided ahead of the FPL deadline. So if you're not following through social media, make sure you do so. And yes, mate, look, I kind of believe Christmas Eve is upon us. My mind is blown. I've got to sort Elf in the Shelf out. I've got to still do my Christmas shopping. I've still got to get the food in. I've still got content, man. It's non-stop. So, yeah. Looking forward to getting this period out of the way and just relaxing a little bit.
I mean, for us because we're in this football broadcasting as well, we've got the family pressures, but then we've got also the pressure to keep up with the community. And as I was saying off air, I was queuing for a long old while today. And in the end, the butchers actually shut. There was over 200 people waiting for their turkeys. Crazy, crazy times. But talking about turkeys, there might be some people, sitting out like turkeys on the side of the pitch. We've got quite a few injuries to actually talk through. And I think one of the big ones is Jamie Vardy. He's owned by quite a number of the community. He comes into this game week with quite a few back-to-back big score lines. He's doing very well so far this season. What's the news on Vardy? Do you think he's likely to be rested for the Boxing Day fixture?
Well, good news is we've already had Brendan Rodgers talk ahead of the game. He actually spoke on Tuesday, and he basically confirmed that Jamie Vardy is absolutely fine, 100%. There are no questions as to whether he'll be involved. It's an ongoing groin problem. So you might have seen sort of Jamie Vardy grimace towards the latter stages of a couple of games in recent times. That seems to happen when he's a little bit, maybe he's fatigued and tired, and he just starts to feel it a little bit. And, inherently, Brendan Rodgers pulls him off as a precaution, pulls him off as probably the wrong way. Substitutes. Jamie Vardy gets substituted.
Great use of the word.
Due to an ongoing groin problem that's being managed. So certainly in terms of the Boxing Day fixture, it's not a concern. But maybe, the ones after that, it's normally 2 or 3 days before he's sort of firing on all cylinders again. So there may be question marks around that follow-up fixture, depending, of course, how many minutes he plays. If Leicester are cruising in that game and he comes off a little bit early, then he can get a little bit of an opportunity for an early shower and start that recovery process as soon as possible.
I mean, I was going to ask, is pulling off the usual kind of procedure that you do for a groin injury? I've heard that's quite useful.
On certain conditions, it can be fairly helpful.
See, this is what we do here. We give great advice on all sorts of conditions. We don't mind getting down and dirty with it. But talking about people that did get, downed this weekend, first of all, before the match even kicked off, Reece James, and then moving into it, Ben Chilwell was down on the floor twice in that Chelsea game. What's the news on them? And do you continue the kind of mantra that you said, Zuma probably, for the time being, transfer either of those out just so that you don't have a headache?
I mean, the long and the short of it is that Frank Lampard basically wasn't given any guarantees with regards to either of those players. Initially, post-match, he was fairly optimistic that they could feature over the festive period. And although neither has been ruled out, what he did say was, they're doubtful. So given the strength and the depth of that Chelsea backline, I wouldn't be expecting to be taking any risks. And it could be, the game on January the 3rd, I think it is, before either of those appear, or maybe even after that in the FA Cup, to get some more minutes in the leg. What we do know with regards to Reece James, it's a knee problem that will be managed. We don't want to push it too hard because, if there is some suggestion that he may have to go under the knife and have a surgical procedure just to remedy that problem. So it probably just needs a little bit of a tidy up, maybe it's even a clean out, a wash. And that might be something that is scheduled for the summer, a little bit of, downtime. So it'll be a case of making sure that he's okay between now and then, and they don't want to force any issues too much. With regards to Ben Chilwell, we've seen there was a coming together with Jared Bowen. He rolled his ankle. Television replays, slow motion, always make things look a little bit worse than they probably actually are. Certainly a sprain. To what degree, we're not sure, but, reading between the lines, I suggest it's fairly mild. And yeah, look, if he misses the next 2 games, then, inherently we're looking at typically a 7 to 14 day recovery for that type of injury. So certainly nothing that would worry us long term.
I mean, as well, the good thing with possibly making that move to Zuma is once again we saw another set-piece goal for Chelsea at the weekend. So it's not daft to kind of do that and removes the worry as well. Now, one that will probably be music to the Chelsea forward lines is Ziyech is once again sniffing around, returning for the team. I think a lot of the problems with Chelsea is due to a lack of settled front line. So I don't know if Ziyech being fit actually helps that out. But what's the news on him? Because at one point he was an FPL favourite.
He was, yes. And look, I was really sort of sweet on him. I brought him in and then I've subsequently got rid of him after he suffered that hamstring problem. So he was sidelined in and around the same time as Callum Hudson-Odoi. Hudson-Odoi was injured in training, I think 24 hours later after Ziyech. Now, both players returned to the training pitches last Friday ahead of game week 14. As we know, Hudson-Odoi returned to the matchday squad on Monday night and Ziyech wasn't involved. And that was more of a precautionary measure, given the fact that, he came into the season on the back of a fairly serious knee injury. So again, his fitness was affected with that. But I was working on the assumption that, given the fact that he's already been involved for what will be, a week of training, that Ziyech would make, the Boxing Day fixtures round 15. But Lampard's come out and he's basically poured a little bit of cold water on that and suggested that it's probably going to be too soon. And we're looking at the next week or so. So realistically, maybe game week 16 for Ziyech to come back into that Chelsea matchday squad.
2-1s for another blue team that have suffered blues with injuries this season, Pereira and Soyuncu. Now, this has been talked about for a long, long time, but Rodgers has actually kind of given it a key, which was a shock to me, that Soyuncu might be returning quicker than expected, and Pereira is also there. What kind of news can you give on those two?
Yeah, so the Soyuncu, both Soyuncu and Pereira returned in the Europa League a couple of weeks back, and both players suffered a recurrence or certainly suffered setbacks. Soyuncu, the concern initially was whether he had removed the muscle from the bone, what we call an avulsion fracture. It wasn't a recurrence of that; it was more of just a further tests were pretty clear, and it hadn't really showed any major structural damage. It's just, as well as the physiological aspect of the injury and whether you can cope with the demands of the game, psychologically in your brain, you need to get through those minutes and, to put in those hard yards, to have a few, decent, robust challenges, to overstretch a little bit, just to get that little bit of confidence in your body. And I think that's what it was really with Soyuncu. It was just he didn't feel 100% confident, and they decided to pull him back from first team duties. Now he has been training, he's been progressing really well. So if it's not game week 15, game week 16 is more than realistic for him. With Ricardo Pereira, we're coming off the back of a long-term knee injury, reconstructive surgery to the anterior cruciate ligament. So it's a slightly different situation with him, and the fact that he's done very little over the last 9 months. He managed an hour-long run out for the under-23s before that Europa game. And again, he's tweaked his groin, and it's not uncommon that players returning from long-term injury suffer minor setbacks in terms of tweaks and muscle strains. We don't have anything definitive in terms of his return to play. Brendan Rodgers only would go as far as to say he's some way off. So we're looking at early 2021. Realistically for Pereira. So, those fullbacks as it currently stands, we see Castagna back in that Leicester lineup with, James Justin. They look locked in, certainly in the short term.
And one of the ones that has been so good, since Project Restart, but again has picked up these knocks and recurring injuries is Mikel Antonio. And one of the problems has been with West Ham putting away chances. Allaire has looked good at times. He's been in the right positions, but he's just not put them away. And I think that's a big, big problem for the Hammers that we've seen, especially in that Chelsea game. What's the kind of news on him and kind of a focus? I know it's a bit in the future. I know we don't want to go too far off, but the double game week is coming up. Is there any chance that he'll be featuring in that?
It looks pretty good at this point in time. If they follow the same trajectory as he's currently at, there shouldn't be any issues there. Mikel Antonio's outside working on the grass. So typically with any injury, it's a phased return. It's a slow integration. You will go from transition from working in the gym to working outside on the training pitches, working on an individualized training program. Once he comes through these steps, and we talk about task-based activities, then he'll progress onto team duties and he'll be involved in the team. And as he progresses through that, they'll go on to full contact, normal training. And, as long as he can tolerate and cope with that, then David Moyes will be looking, at which fixture would be appropriate. But, it could be a fairly quick process, transitioning from outside on the grass to then starting to working with the team, maybe doing a little bit of warm-up stuff and so on and so forth. So the double game week is realistic, as we will just wait and see. But of course, given his problems, we'll not want to push him too hard. And unfortunately, setbacks and recurrences just never seem to be too far away with Mikel, which is unfortunate, because if he can stay fit, he's a very appealing fantasy asset. He's got a lot of plus points, and there's a lot of advantages to own him in and around that price point.
And also the honest thing is that it is a double game week. He might not play both games because of that injury record. He might be managed by Moyes. Moving on to the final two, and I think this has been a problem this season for Manchester City. It's the perennial absence of a known striker. Aguero and Jesus are looking on the cusp of returns, but what's the likelihood that they'll be back as well? Looking at that blank game week just before the double game week, Man City are one of the sides that do have a fairly good fixture, and I think that the return of either of them, but more so Aguero, kind of facilitates probably a better De Bruyne, a better Sterling, just a better front line as a whole. I mean, my focus is mainly on Aguero here, but we do have to talk about Jesus as well. What kind of news do we have there, Ben?
Well, good news for Jesus. He was left out game week 14 as a precaution, non-specified from Pep, but he did feature in the Carabao Cup, played well and scored. So he looked fairly bright, fairly sharp. We've touched upon it before with Jesus. He needs to, go out there and prove to Pep that he doesn't need a striker during this January window to rotate when Sergio Aguero, isn't 100%. And secondly, does Pep look ahead to the summer transfer window when potentially Sergio Aguero will be leaving and to bring in somebody else big, or is Gabriel Jesus big enough to fill those boots? The jury's still very much out with regards to that. And chances are becoming, less and less. For me, I'm expecting a big performance from Jesus. Unfortunately, it's going to be against my hometown club. We're having some massive issues post-COVID crisis, fatigue, chronic fatigue, players still missing, and those who have returned are still struggling to complete 90 minutes and also feature in back-to-back fixtures. So for me, City are one of the standout picks for this game week. And, you've got your usual suspects, your De Bruyne's, your Sterling's, your Mahrez, and I think Gabriel Jesus is one that definitely is worth some serious consideration. In fact, he is my fan team captain this week in their €15,000 game, which, by the way, of course, is free to enter for any new subscribers to the fan team platform. If you go along, you sign up, and you can enter that tournament for absolutely free. For existing members, it's just €2. It's a €2 entry, and it's a guaranteed €3,000 first prize.
Goodness me. I mean, you bring all sorts to the table here, Ben. We had a competition, we had a discussion about Performance Lab and the great deals that you bring there, and then this fan team stuff. I mean, we bring it all to the table here, but bringing it to the table as well, some discussion points that we have to go through. Now, we don't know the details yet, but because the EFL Cup final has been moved, there's now the potential of more double game weeks and more possible blanks. Obviously, we'll keep you up to date with that, but the likelihood is possible blanks in game week 29, and up to 8 games could be affected in that one, and in game week 33, up to 2 games could be affected, and in possible double game weeks in 26, 32 and 37. I don't think there'll be 3 game weeks. I think there'll probably be one extra one, but it's becoming a little bit, I don't know, crazy managing all these game weeks, kind of planning what to do in all of them. We've given some kind of guidance, and I think we'll give a bit more guidance post this Boxing Day group of fixtures, because again, you and I have been reluctant to kind of commit to any sort of strategy purely because injuries, rotation, all those kind of things come to the fore. And one final thing before we get into data and team discussions is your wildcard. Make sure to use wildcard 1 by game week 16, Monday the 28th of December, because otherwise it's gone. Poof, it's in the air. It will be a hard one not to use that wild card, but if your team's that good, maybe you're just that much of a good player, you don't need it. So we talked about the Chelsea defenders in terms of their management and also the nice games that they have. So I think we want to talk about another defence, and it's buoyant Burnley. I mean, I still think the community are criminally overlooking their defence. Taylor once again delivered this weekend. He didn't get the clean sheet and the assist. He just got the assist, but they're looking so good, Burnley. Really good. And then another clean sheet for Chris Wood. I mean, I think, is it time to possibly double up on Burnley defenders, Ben? Or is it just enough, with their 4.4 price mark? I think they're basically, you have to own at least one, and it gives a really good rotation option. But would 2 be a little bit crazy?
Two is a slight push for me, unless, look, I don't think there's anything wrong with the strategy of maybe, loading up on low budget defenders to ensure you can maybe shoehorn in some big premium assets, further up the field. Fixture wise, it isn't looking too bad for Burnley over the coming game weeks. I think that the standout fixtures, which you would look to maybe pull those defenders out, would be Liverpool and the second one of the double game week, and then maybe game week 21 where you've got Chelsea. But other than that, realistically, there's points to be had. Leeds this weekend, but that's it. That's at Ellen Road as well. That's going to be a tough one. It's one that I probably flagged as a win for Leeds. But those who are maybe tempted by Chris Wood, you're talking about a team and Leeds that cannot defend set pieces. And in Chris Wood, Burnley have got one of the best maybe headers of the ball, certainly in the top flight at this moment in time. So you wouldn't put anybody off bringing Chris Wood specifically in for that fixture. They're coming off a great result against Wolves, 2-1. That's a real shot in the arm. So Burnley are on the up, and given the price points, given the ownership, they're always going to be in and around. That you're never going to see a Sean Dyche give up too many goals, unless you talk it like one of those real, the Manchester Cities or the Liverpools of this world. They're more than capable of holding their own against most in the Premier League.
Yeah, and I think the shout again, I was almost very criticised on here for saying Chris Wood is a potential player over the next few weeks. But, looking at the fixtures, looking at his form, he's got 2 XG over the last 2 games. Leeds, Sheffield United, Fulham next. Obviously Leeds is away, but then United and Fulham at home. They're not bad fixtures, not bad at all. I think he's a decent-ish own, probably over the next 3. I'm definitely considering it, but the toss-up is between him and Adams to come in for Wilson. But yeah, Burnley are in the ascendancy. Dyche knows what he's doing. He has this probably psychological edge over all the other teams that are vying for relegation as well. But just because he's been there, he's done it. Now, talking of another good defensive player, Chilwell, I think he's a great own. I think the problem with West Ham is obviously they've had a bad run of fixtures, that they've not played too well recently, and it does make me worried the fact that they've conceded 8 goals in their last 4, fourth most big chances conceded in the last 4, and 6.42 XG conceded over the last 4 is not great. But there's a turn of fixtures, and what I like about him is he's one of the most creative players, not just defenders, but one of the most creative players in the last 4 matches, with 10 chances created, 0.84 XA over that time. He is in and around there. I think I'd be even more interested than I have, although I don't know how I can be more interested because I own him. I think for the community, he is one to look at, because when Antonio comes back, if he is fit, he looks good, but he's assisting or getting involved with Allaire. I think the goals are a little bit short at the moment for West Ham, and I think that goes back to the problem of they need an out-and-out finisher. Allaire is more, I think, a team player. He kind of assists with the build-up. He's more of a target man, whereas Antonio is the finisher in that side. And Chilwell, it could really kind of get involved with that, but I think they're good to own over the next 6 game weeks as well. Looking at their fixtures, West Ham actually, I think, have the 5th best, if I remember off the top of my head. Let me just quickly check that. So the top 3 were teams that do have fixtures in the blank game week. But yeah, West Ham, they're actually 4th best. So they've got Brighton, Southampton, Everton, Burnley, Crystal Palace in the blank game week. So they're all opportunities to have clean sheets there. I mean, we know Brighton can't score at the moment, even in a game against Sheffield United with 10 men. Dreadful stuff. Southampton, a little bit harder, but Ings is missing. Everton don't really want to attack at the moment. They're playing quite defensive football. And then Burnley and Crystal Palace. And the double game week as well for West Ham is West Brom are in there as well. These are all cleanable games. I think Chilwell is a great own. I mean, does he interest you? He's not very much owned in the communities. He's not like high. He's only 3.5%. He'd be a bit of a differential for you there, Ben.
Good differential when you're looking to get into that West Ham backline, and most people seem to be jumping on Cresswell. Or even Ogbonas. Ogbonas just to get a little bit of interest in terms of just chatter from his threat from set pieces. Do I like him as the concern that I had maybe a couple of games ago was the injury to Masuaku, not particularly because of I rate him as a player. It's more the fact that it forced Moyes to change this successful setup and having that 5 at the back. They looked really solid. Defensively, they look great. And that, with those 3 sort of solid centre-backs, as it were, almost allowed those wing-backs to bomb on and create. And I did like West Ham. But now, we're switched to this 4. And, there's no sort of light at the end of the tunnel with regards to switching back to a 5. That would be the only worry. So if we're focusing primarily on attacking returns, if you don't really see West Ham maybe picking up a lot of clean sheets, then I'd maybe want to see Mikel Antonio back in that West Ham team, offering a little bit more threat than Sebastian Haller, who, doesn't justify the £40 million price tag which he arrived with. I mean, it must be something about that 40 million mark, because he seems to be suffering the exact same issue that we're having with Geordie Joe Linton, us on Tyneside.
Can't make that comparison. I mean, Geordie Joe, he's on great form at the moment. But seriously, on the point of that, I get you. The bread and butter of any defensive asset in FPL is clean sheets, and if you don't feel comfortable with the new West Ham setup, I mean, it's probably more coincidence, but since Masuaku's been out, they've had a few kind of big goal threats against them. They've had a few goals where they conceded a lot, so maybe you're right to have a little bit of apprehension there. So maybe other assets we can look at. Do you want me to lay into Timo Werner to make yourself feel a little bit better? I don't know if you want to tell the community yet of your transfers, if you've made them, because he was seriously on the chopping block.
In answer, yes, I have. It was yes. I believe in poker they call it playing on tilt, when you've had a couple of bad beats and you just become all irrational. You're playing on your emotions instead of just taking a step back and thinking things through. Monday night's game, the Werner performance was almost just it was the cherry on the cake. It was the straw that broke the camel's back on after the Rashford blank in a 6-goal United haul. The Chilwell limping off. It was a perfect storm, and Werner had to go. And I wanted to freshen the front line. I had been considering Firmino in the build-up to game week 14. And the only reason I didn't pull the trigger was because I wanted to make sure I was going at this period with a fully fit squad, as it were, and I didn't want to burn any transfers on players who were fit and potentially starters, which Werner was. But I couldn't bear it any longer. So he went. He basically came out of that lineup, and it was almost a straight swap in terms of attacking assets. Was with Tammy. I brought in Tammy Abraham. Slight concern. I think it's a difficult game against Arsenal. I really do. They should. This will be the true measure of the players in the squad. Are they behind Arteta, and are they going to, prepared to fight for him? Because if they continue performing that the way they are, they're basically saying, they're going to get their manager the sack. And so, the game it's a big opportunity. We're expecting Chilwell and Reece James to be missing. Obviously, Ziyech is out. I've got a sneaky, whether I'm being blindsided, I think Willian will come in for Arsenal, and I would expect a big performance from him against these former employers. I wouldn't be surprised if Aubameyang, returns from this minor calf injury. But look, I've went with, you very rarely do a transfer just looking at a game or two. It's really that sort of 6 to 8 week, little bit of longevity in that pick. Giroud, I wouldn't expect him to start off the back of Tammy's 2 goals, but certainly, Giroud maybe is in and around that 60 to 70 minute mark for Tammy is a strong possibility. I definitely expect him to get minutes, but that works well for me because, if he gets brought off in the 60th minute, then that tells me that he's probably going to start in the game after that as well. So trying to catch these Chelsea players when they are, quite streaky will be difficult, but whatever happens, it's an improvement or a step up from Timo Werner.
Yes, so tilted Timo caused you to make a tilted transfer. He's not doing good at the moment. And the interesting thing as well, talking of teams, the performance of Chelsea recently, they should have been scoring more goals. They're actually underperforming XG. And to back up everything that you've said here, why you've got out Timo Werner, 8-game goal drought, 279 minutes per goal ratio this season, 61% shot accuracy, and only, and this is really shocking, 33% of big chances converted. Compare that to somebody like Aubameyang, who we said has been quiet this season, hasn't looked good. Aubameyang's converted 67% of his big chances, and that kind of shows you that for Aubameyang, it's not his quality, it's the fact that the team aren't backing him up. But also, I've mentioned there Chelsea are underperforming XG. Well, he's underperformed XG just in the last 4 matches alone. I didn't extend the period because I thought, he's been really poor in the last 4 matches. Underperformed by 2.33 XG. Terrible stuff. Now, I mentioned, with the discussion of Ziyech coming back, that I think tactics and team members might be part of the problem. I think it's this bedding in thing that you and I both talked about, Ben, at the start of the season. Takes players time, but also he doesn't know who his teammate's going to be week in, week out. The best kind of teams that you see in history, you could basically name, 9, 10 of the starting 11 week in, week out. And also at Leipzig, I think he was asked to do less dribbling, and he had more kind of members up there, up front with him that kind of passed to him so that he could make runs, but he didn't have to dribble and he could just shoot. He's more of, a finisher rather than anything else. Ziyech, as I said, may help him, but I think that the problem with Lampard in this team, the forward element now, is there's no settled 11. You're not going to say, Abraham's going to start, or Giroud, or whoever is going to partner Werner. Is Werner going to be out wide? Is he going to be through the middle? He can play out wide. He's capable of doing that, but he just needs the right kind of service, which Ziyech can probably give him. But I don't know if the Chelsea team is built up to play for Werner's play style or for their own play style, and I think that's the danger there. And then there's also the psychological element of, when you're a striker, when you go through these terrible goal droughts, you need almost the support system to keep your mentality on side. Otherwise, it can really knock you and take a long struggle to get back. So I think it's a big problem, and I think you've made the switch at the right time, Ben. I think it's right to get him out. But one of the ones that you did like at Chelsea, on top of Tammy Abraham, was Mount. And I thought I'd explore this one for you because you said this one, he's glad on the eye for you. But from FF Scout, this little fact was taken. He's taken 34 of Chelsea's last 42 corners, so he's well fixed on the set pieces. But also, I looked into this, he's got 4 big chances created in the last 4 matches and an impressive 1.18 XA that's only bettered by De Bruyne in the same period of 1.52. He's got 1.52 XGI, which is somewhat impressive, but he's more in the build-up play. But appealing for me, in many senses, is the fact that he's the starter in Chelsea. I've talked there about rotation and the side trying to find who's their best forward line, but that Mount will start week in, week out. For me, I wouldn't like to own him. I think around his price point, you've got talismans like Zaha, you've got other players, that can do well. But I don't hate it as an FPL choice. I think there's a lot to like about it. Grealish as well is around the same price point. So there's no judgment from me because, as I said there, Chelsea are one of the best kind of XG creators over the last few game weeks. They've just not been putting these chances away. So Mount might have had more assists if he had a more maybe confident or competent striker that he was feeding.
Yeah, look, I mean, Frank Lampard is sweet on Mason Mount, which is why he sort of piqued my interest a little bit, because the difficulty, as with a lot of players in that Chelsea lineup, is looking at guaranteed minutes, and you're thinking if you wanted a way in to that team, and you're going to be overlooking, if you're looking in the official game, you're going to be overlooking primarily the likes of N'Golo Kante, Jorginho, Kovacic, not really attracting a great deal of interest. So in terms of, best of the rest, in terms of attacking players, Mason Mount, I seem to be attracting players who, those set piece takers. I'm big on the likes of, your Ward-Prowses, and I think regardless of how the team's playing, regardless of how the individual is playing, when you have somebody on set pieces who can strike a dead ball, and we know that they've got quality, then that always gives you a chance. And I think that's what I like about the likes of Mason Mount, maybe more so in the fact that, do I really think he's a great player? Do I think he's a great England player? Far from it. But you know what? He gets themselves in those positions. And like I say, when you're pumping the ball in the box, we've seen it with Thiago Silva's header on Monday night for the opener at West Ham. It was a great flighted free kick. He puts it into great areas, and Chelsea are going to create chances, and even if they aren't the best at finishing, the law of averages, percentages would tell you that eventually one will go in. They will take one of those in the end.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is, I think 20% of goals on average come from set pieces, but they're overlooked by a lot of teams. But obviously Chelsea, Frank Lampard, they know this statistic and they're working on it well. It worked with Liverpool. It got them, one nearly Premier League title and then one definite Premier League title. It got them a Champions League working on these marginal gains of set pieces. A lot of people, just think that, set pieces, good throw-ins, a little bit of physicality in corners, that's for the likes of Burnley. But it's not. If you're going to be elite, if you're going to be a Moneyball kind of Billy Bean, breaking the numbers team, then you got to look into those things. Now, we're going to switch it over to, again, somebody that I'm not sure how I feel, but Wilfred Zaha. And it's interesting to me that he has a similar minutes per chance and minutes per goal data as to somebody that you're really keen on here, Ben. And he's got similar data to Danny Ings. I mean, it is ridiculous kind of stuff from Zaha this season. It's probably one of, we talk about it as almost a fine wine. It's a vintage season for him so far. We'll see if it continues. I think the new tactics that Hodgson has deployed is really working for Crystal Palace in the attacking sense. They're not as boring as they used to be. They're not as defensive. In some games, that means they're caught out. I'm not sure why they lost 7-0 to Liverpool. I think that was a bit of a freak one. But these happen, Liverpool lost 7-2 to Aston Villa. I don't think that makes them a bad side. But another point, and this comes from Zaha helping him, but Bentek has found a rare vein of form. And it'll be annoying for him that he got that red, that he's banned. But, this could bolster the appeal of Zaha. I'm not sure if I trust the Belgian up top in my team, but he does. This is Benteke have the joint top shots in the box over the last 4 matches and an impressive XGI too. I mean, that is quite mad data for somebody that, we write off 5.5 asset. I don't know if I can trust him. Also, difficult fixtures for Crystal Palace. But, you know, maybe the form of Benteke then kind of lubricates the mind to going, oh, well, maybe Zaha can be brought in. He's somebody that you have brought in, Ben. Does this just empower you more? You're thinking, yes, good on Zaha, good on Benteke.
It's a difficult one. I think this game and the Boxing Day is a real, we'll see what Crystal Palace are really about. I agree that the Liverpool result was a slight anomaly. They should have been back in that game. They started slow, very poor to go goal down after 2 minutes, but didn't panic, kept about their game plan, continued, playing the game right. Could have easily had a couple of goals, good chances, spurned. Ayew being one of those who came in for the suspended Benteke. And then, look, they were so clinical, Liverpool. Every time they went forward, they seemed to score. It's about, things like that can happen. It's about how you bounce back. And we talked about, the fragility of confidence. And, I think if they're, coming up against Aston Villa, again, arguably they're coming off back-to-back clean sheets. Quite impressive last time out against it. Tricky opposition in West Brom. If Villa were to get an early goal, you can see that sort of confidence starting to sort of seep away. And for me, Zaha is very much a confidence player. It's just, if you're defending well and you've got that foundational, solid back four, that clean sheet to defend, to build on, that allows players like the Wilfred Zahas to express themselves without the pressures. You nick Bentek, you nicks a goal. Then Wilfred Zaha can do his little tricks and he can try to beat his man. If it doesn't come off, you know what it is. Then so what? We're still winning. We're still in this game. When you're getting beat and the pressure's slightly different, it's almost like it doesn't become it. The necessity is to produce something, and you're playing, the averages. You're playing, do you take the risky option? Maybe not. We're going to go safe. So that would be the only concern. But I do like Zaha, and we touched upon it in the late fitness test podcast. Christian Benteke, Estelle called it. He said, I think I'm going to bring in Christian Benteke. And the game was actually live that night, and he subsequently got sent off. He was dismissed, so maybe it was Stella. It was a kiss of death. And although we laughed it off at the time as to being, well, you're a little bit of a fish here in this fantasy arena. You look at some of that underlying data, and you're looking at his price, and somebody who's producing that data for, on the form and what he brings to that Palace team, he does look nailed. The concerns, if he has a slight dip, then, I think Hodgson does have other options there. You've got Batshuayi, who's champing at the bit to come on, and Ayew, who had a great season. Last year he struggled to hit those dizzy heights of what he produced, and it was probably on the back of his form that Palace stayed up really last year. So yeah, but if you want to steam into somebody, even as a short-term punt, and see how it goes, then there are worse options out there than Bentek, certainly.
Yeah, I think when he comes back, he'll be a starter for sure. 5.5, he could be a facilitator in your squad. People have the likes of these 4.5 Brewster, for example. I think for 1 million more, you can get a guaranteed starter, which Brewster isn't, but also he might be involved with the goals, and this Crystal Palace team is looking a lot more goal-scory this season. Bringing it towards the end of the show, there's a few more points that I wanted to bring. A tale of two Manchesters. We're looking at the red half overperforming in terms of attack and the blue half's poor form. as they are underperforming. But what I think one of the most interesting things from this game week, this is why I asked about Aguero, but Pep Guardiola's points were, and he was asked whether the old Manchester City came back in that Arsenal game where they won 4-1. And Pep actually responded saying, if it rains all the time and is sunny for one day, it doesn't mean the weather will change. That to me kind of speaks that even Pep knows that the team aren't good enough, that they're not doing well. And it does make me hesitant to continue with De Bruyne, because even if the manager's kind of coming out in public, he might be almost acknowledging, he's signed this new contract. Maybe he's looking at this side and thinking, yes, it's going to be difficult this season, but obviously he'll be given copious amounts of funds for next year and the year after. This could be just a rebuild year that he's looking at, settle the squad, get some fairly good results, bring a few players through, like Diaz, Cancelo, but he'll be looking at the likes of Fernandinho, Aguero, maybe even Walker. These are players that are getting on in their careers. Aguero, as you said, might be leaving at the end of the season. Fernandinho can't continue. Walker can't continue because he's getting older now as well. This could be Pep 2.0, and this is just the signal that to the City fans and maybe to us FPL community that, yeah, this season we're not going to be like we once were. And so we do have to look at maybe Manchester United, Liverpool, Leeds, Leicester. These are all teams with higher XG per games than City themselves. I mean, does that comment alone make you a little bit worried, or maybe not just that comment, but the fact of that comment coupled with how Manchester City have been this year?
The difficulty for me is looking at those Manchester City premium assets priced accordingly. They're priced on 2019-20 performances, and that's not really reflective of what's happening this season. Kevin De Bruyne is priced up on last season's form. Not the and what we're getting is maybe a slightly elevated 2018-19 Kevin De Bruyne. Slow start by his own very high standards. And good performances have been very sporadic. Let's take it into context. Yeah, it was a decent performance. Let's look at who they were playing. Let's look at the competition as well, and let's look at, I suppose, the value that maybe Mikel Arteta placed in the competition by the starting 11 that he selected. City go ahead with on another day, goalkeeper puts his cap on that one. And then still Arsenal had that 20 to 25 minute period where they'd done okay. They didn't, so it maybe wasn't all, one-way traffic, and isn't necessarily reflective of the scoreline, that performance from City. So do I think that City are back? Pep's exactly right. The sun shines on a dog's arse every now and again, or what's the other one? Even a bus clocks right twice a day. So you need to be seeing City back up those performances. For me, around this period, if you're looking at premium assets in midfield, then De Bruyne is probably, I'm reluctant and a little bit reticent to say that he's bottom of Santa's, list, Christmas wish list, because I'm looking at what Bruno is producing week in and week out, and the two in terms of FPL are just incomparable. Really, it isn't even a discussion point, because you would go Bruno every day of the week.
Yeah, and to bring it to another Manchester United asset, because Bruno's doing well, but I'm liking the look of Anthony Martial. Obviously, it's a little bit early. It's only 2 game weeks, and we talked about how he's so in and out. But maybe this is the time. Last season, you and I both had this where we had him in when he was in at the right time. This could be his time. He's got that low ownership, kind of tough games ahead, but he's returned to this fitness with 2 double-digit hauls. And looking back to probably his best form since last season, over the last 4 game weeks, the Manchester United team are probably the top team in terms of attack. They have overperformed in terms of goals scored, but looking at their XG, looking at their data, most chances created in the last 4, second most shots inside the box, second for XG. Obviously, some of this data is buoyed by the Leeds match, but United look a little bit more competent. Less so defensively, interestingly enough. I think their defence has almost regressed a little bit. But Martial is looking great. And I think another point that really impressed me, looking again at managers' comments, Solskjaer talked about his side being much fitter than they were at the start of the season. Something that you've said before is actually since starts of seasons, teams actually regress in fitness. But is Ole right? Does this make another enticing reason to maybe get more than just Fernandes and maybe a Martial, because the team is looking fitter and they're working better together? Is that a truism?
I looked at Anthony Martial. He would have been one of my picks this week, probably instead of Tammy Abraham. And I was 0.3 million short. So he was on the radar. He was one that I was hoping to pick up. Good differential, low ownership. And, with Bruno on the form that he's in, then, why not? Given the fact that it seems to be those two who are stand out. Marcus Rashford is, I'm not really sure what's going on that front. And then Mason Greenwood, or is it Mason? Is it Van der Beek? Is it Pogba that could come in there? I don't know. So certainly from an attacking perspective, you would think that it's Martial who's going to get the nod ahead of Cavani. And Cavani might be used as more of a bit part player, or certainly around maybe his domestic cup competition. So, look, I like Martial, and how many more times or how often can we say United are overperforming? I mean, maybe just the guy with the stats is just getting it wrong, and these players are just, good at converting chances, because we said it all to the second half of the season, particularly when it went on that run that propelled them into that Champions League qualification spot. They were superb, and that primarily that's coming down to the likes of your Brunos and your Martial, who excelled during that period as well. So jump on them while you can. I think they haven't got the European distractions at this point, so fully focused on domestic competition. Then they make a strong case to be included in your squad.
The interesting thing for me as well is this kind of form over fixtures thing. They go into a difficult run of games, and I look at the likes of Kane and the Tottenham lads that people are really sticking with. I think maybe the double up of the Tottenham players is maybe not the right thing anymore. I'm still reticent to bring out Kane. I think he's a firm one for the season, and he's got some good fixtures. But then FPL is about jumping onto players like Kane, like Martial at the right time. And one of the things that I was considering this week is dump De Bruyne, dump Kane, get Martial, get Fernandes. I thought it was a very spicy prospect. Very differential as well, I think, in many aspects. I think even your mouth is salivating at the thought of how kind of out there that one is. And, I'll go into it just quickly. The Tottenham attacking woes are very real. In comparison to Man United, it's kind of like Tottenham's amazing form has been taken by Manchester United here. The Spurs side have had a terrible run in attack. Obviously, Son and Kane have been on the score sheet. They've done well. But it's becoming more and more obvious each week that everything kind of comes through Tottenham's two attackers there of Son and Kane. They don't really have a plan B. And in these last few weeks, the side are third lowest for XG, third lowest for chances created, third lowest for shots in the box. And yeah, the fixtures are now turning for the better, but if a team has been this poor for a while, and they did turn a little bit even before the turn of fixtures, I think probably from like game week 11 onwards, they haven't been like the swashbuckling that they were a little bit earlier. This is kind of going back to classic Mourinho at Chelsea and Manchester United. When the going gets tough, when he's a little bit worried, he'll go back to defensive football, which is fair enough. You know, he sees games out 1-0, 2-0, but he hasn't even had that of recent. So I do have question marks over that. One of the final things that I wanted to talk about was, will Maddison actually, again, somebody on set pieces? Leicester have been underperforming on set pieces so far. They normally have quite high quality when they come to it. If Soyuncu is coming back, then they might do. So looking at the attack of last season, in terms of Leicester's set pieces, they were top 6 for attempts and set plays, 5th best for headed attempts from set plays, and had an XG from set plays of 13.37, which was top 6. Then you look at this season, and my goodness, they're only second bottom in a lot of this, 15th for chances created from set pieces. It's worrying stuff, and I do think that with Maddison kind of coming back to fitness, coming back to his prime, he is so good. There's no denying it. He's really, really good. I think if Soyuncu comes back into the side, they could be a threat again from set pieces. He might be a good one to own as well. But do you think that fitness alone, Maddison alone, can turn that around? Or is that a little bit extra from Leicester that they need to work on? I mean, even Brendan Rodgers himself has said, we've not been good enough at set pieces this year. Would that give you confidence that actually there might be a turnaround in set piece quality over the next few weeks?
They've certainly got the personnel to be able to, to influence that underlying data. Last season you could probably point, yes, you had Maddison, but also you had Ben Chilwell in there who would have, contributed heavily to that data as well. It's a big call, and I do really like Maddison, and that it could be the second half of the season where we really start to see him flourish and shine and start to reproduce some of that form that we see in last season. Looking ahead to Euro 2021, he can benefit from that rest, and he can really come on strong. And you've seen the emergence of Jack Grealish, in recent times in the Gareth Southgate squad. James Maddison might, he may think to himself, well, I'm no longer that guaranteed shoe-in into that, Three Lions team. Even Ross Barkley will probably be thinking that he can push for that. So, that can spur the likes of James Maddison on. And look, if anybody's capable of putting the ball on a sixpence piece, well, Maddison's your buy. And with the likes of Johnny Evans, Soyuncu, you've got some big old units in that team who can, threaten in terms of attacking output. So, yeah, it's something that's been addressed. It's something that be worked on in the training ground. And sometimes it just comes down to a little bit of luck as well. Maybe some miscommunication, some poor defending. Player becomes unmarked, as we've seen at West Ham on Monday night with the Thiago Silva header. They just need that little bit of luck, and then all of a sudden it's they're back. They're back in the groove.
There you go. My thing just froze there. Yeah, I think this is the interesting thing. I think Leicester could be back in the groove. I mean, their attacking data has really improved over the last few game weeks as well. I was very reluctant to consider the likes of Vardy, the likes of Maddison, up until maybe the last few game weeks where I thought, well, actually, that there's been an improvement, an upturn. And like I said, compared to Manchester City, even their XG per game is much, much better. So I think that's it. I think the final things that I want to talk about is your transfers. Do you want to confirm who you've brought in or who you're considering, Ben? And then I'll talk through my multitude of plans that I have for this game week.
Confirmed. So done, dusted, locked in, is Tammy Abraham and Roberto Firmino are both into my team. Of course, at the expense of Timo Werner. And although Ralph Hasenhüttl didn't come out and categorically say that Danny Ings is not available, it's my own personal opinion that we'd be very lucky to see Danny Ings again this year. So Danny Ings was moved out as well. So that's the two.
Oh, bless him, Danny. I hope he comes back soon because he's one of my favourites. Now, in terms of my team, I'm a little bit stuck with what to do. I don't know if I want to go a little bit maverick, a little bit out there with a differential of, as I said there, Martial and Fernandes. But then my thinking is that this game week, maybe not so much for Tottenham, but as you said there, with De Bruyne against Newcastle, an enticing one. But then I've got to consider that this isn't the old De Bruyne. This isn't the Manchester City of years ago. There is a great run of fixtures. And there's this little voice in the back of my head saying, you're jumping off them at the wrong time. But then my other kind of data mind is saying, well, look, the team that is in the ascendancy that is doing it, they're also called Manchester, but they're Manchester United. And the price point of Fernandes means I could get De Bruyne back in if I don't, put my money elsewhere in the team. I've got a second wild card for a reason. I've got transfers for a reason. I can move about. I mean, even with it, Robertson's very premium. I can devalue him at any point to kind of facilitate that move if it needs be. But at the moment, De Bruyne, points per game, just points in general. He's almost half of that of De Bruyne this season. Half of that of Fernandes. There's no real justification for having him in. I put him in the last 2 game weeks, as I said at the time, almost as a punt. And I did say that at the time that I was hoping that this kind of run of fixtures would turn, and it's just not happened. And then I do want to get out the injured James. I want to get out Wanky Wilson. He's just not really good at the moment. Newcastle, the Magpies. So there is the chance that I'll take a hit of -4 to sort out those 3. But there's also the chance that I might... I mean, there's no need exactly for me to get out Wilson in the sense that he's not injured. Obviously, he plays Man City next, but I could rest him. I could play, 5 at the back. I could do some other things. But I like the shout of bringing in Zuma. I like the shout of bringing in Fernandes. And I like the shout of replacing Wilson. So that... I've got no answers at the moment of what I'm going to do, but that's what's going through with my head. I mean, if you were in my shoes, Ben, what would you do? What kind of choices would you make?
I would reluctantly. I always find it hard ditching De Bruyne. Always find it hard, but in the cold light of day, it's not justifying that price tag, and Bruno just ticks so many boxes. So Bruno would 100% come into my team. The Wilson, I would, like I say, depends if you've got fires to put out elsewhere. He's a player that's going to start. He's a player that's on, set on penalties. We've seen against Fulham, Newcastle were terrible. He done absolutely nothing, and then he pops up and he gets the goal. Done the same against Crystal Palace down Selhurst Park. I think he walked away with 11 points, including bonus that night. He got more bonus points than he did touches of the ball. So, he's not a bad player to come off the bench or have in and around your squad.
Would you consider Kane out to get in Fernandes, but then I keep De Bruyne?
Ooh, I mean, for when we're talking about Manchester United, it's Bruno, Martial. You probably lump Rashford in there as players that you would expect to return more often than not. With City, Jesus, Aguero, De Bruyne, Mahrez, it's spread out a little bit. With Tottenham, it's Son and Kane. And it's penalties Kane. So for me, that's a riskier punt. Although it's definitely one of those. This you are going with your heart though by keeping Kevin, because there is no justification really.
Yeah.
You know, you're looking through it. Are them glasses rose tinted, Jason?
Hang on, let me just. Let me. Yes, right now the De Bruyne's gone.
So I think it would be a bold move, ditching Kane, and retaining the services of De Bruyne.
Yeah,
definitely the risk. Yeah,
this
it depends. Look, it really depends on your own strategy and what you feel. You know, do you want to go for a risky Christmas festive punt? You know, a little peck under the mistletoe. You know,
I like that.
With a school headmistress.
I wouldn't with my school headmistress. I'll tell you that she wasn't a looker. I mean, but this sounds like almost a counselling or a therapist. You're kind of saying, this is the move that you want to do with your heart, but you got to do what's right for you, mate. You know, this is this is almost like an intervention of an addiction to Manchester City forward assets. I was stuck with Sterling. Then I got De Bruyne in when I should have got Fernandes all along. You know, it's almost like an incorrect relationship that I need to get out of. But you're the good friend telling me to turn my back on them.
You're being abused, Jason, and I can't stand by and just watch you take a pounding every week.
An emotional pounding, mate.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I think we can end.
Festive fisting.
That's what happens to the turkey, doesn't it, when it gets stuffed? That is the festive fisting that we're all talking about. I don't know what kind of thing you're talking about would happen with me, Ben. But in terms of it, we've had a good one. It's put a smile on my face, building up towards those Boxing Day fixtures. Hopefully, there'll be a Christmas present of a green arrow as well during that period. Not a festive red arrow. I mean, I love Santa, but I don't want to be seeing his red arrow about at all. I want to see a nice big fat green one, and hopefully into the new year as well. I will try and keep people updated with my team. I might post it on Twitter to keep you all in the loop of what is happening. But for now, I'm going to say a very Merry Christmas to you all. We will see you shortly after Christmas, so I don't need to wish you a Happy New Year just yet. But if this is the last time you listen to us before the New Year, then have a happy, healthy New Year as well. But also a thank you for your support so far in this season. And a thank you to you as well, Ben, for this opportunity. It's been great being on here. It's always a highlight of my week.
Yeah, look, thank you for that, Jason. Echo those thoughts. We're coming, like I say, we will be back before the turn of the year, but this season's been a little bit of a whirlwind. Fixtures coming thick and fast. We've had loads of commentaries, loads of live podcasts, learnt a lot along the way, developed and grown, and I think we've come a long way, even since those early days. So thanks for sticking by us and following and commenting. Good or bad, we've got thick skin, and it's the only way we can develop and move forward and improve. So you've got to take the rough with the smooth with that. So yeah, just a big thank you. Wishing you all a great Christmas, and we will be back. We're not sure what kind of format we'll be running over the holidays. These obviously fixture game weeks are coming thick and fast. I think there may be only a 14 or 15 hour transition from one game week to the next in one instance. So that's going to logistically make things slightly different, but we will manage it, and we will still be here, and we will still be producing content. So thank you for the support. Thank you, Jason. Esteemed, puts in the graft. Unbelievable hours, by the way. Yeah. So, you know, give the lad credit. I mean, if it was just this, it would be bad enough, but he's got another proper job and other things going on in the background as well. So just like I say, I appreciate all the time and effort and that you put into Jason. Like I say, it couldn't happen without you, mate. So, you know, so I really do appreciate that. And thanks, guys. And we will see you all again on HotMic or YouTube or through social media very, very soon. So thanks a lot, guys.
See you all very soon.